All right. So we are live, my friend. And so with me today, you guys, I've got a good friend of mine with me on the show. His name is Kevin O'Keefe. He is a licensed real estate agent and a licensed real estate appraiser. And we're going to be talking about one of the most highly debated subjects out there in the real estate world, and that is, which home improvements actually bring real value and which ones don't. So, Kevin, I want to first off thank you for being here, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we all have got busy schedules, and I just want to again thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to be here and looking forward to sharing some information with everybody.
Awesome. So, technical difficulties. So Kevin's, unfortunately, Kevin is a supermodel, but you guys won't be able to see his face. But we couldn't figure that piece out. But nonetheless, you should be able to hear Kevin. And for those that are watching, just give me a thumbs up or a comment to make sure that you can hear myself and you can hear Kevin. So hopefully you guys can hear us. If you can't, you'll just let us know. So the way I want to do this tonight, Kevin, is when we look at it, I want to dive into certain aspects of a home and certain home improvements of a home, and we're gonna talk about how those certain home improvements fall into three buckets. Okay, so for the audience and for the sake of our conversation, bucket one is going to be all about an appraised value. So real property value, not someone that's looking to sell a home, not someone that's necessarily looking to refinance a home, just the property itself and gaining value. So you as an appraiser, if you were to go out to that house, would you give that house more value based on the home improvement? So that's bucket number one. Make sense?
Yep.
All right, cool. So bucket number two, as I'll reference in tonight's show, is return on that home improvement investment when they go to sell the property. So if a seller can expect to get more for the home based on this improvement when they go to sell the home. So that will be bucket number two. And then bucket number three is going to be what we're going to call tonight is saleability, just to help a home sell, but it doesn't bring any real property value. Make sense?
Yep, makes sense.
All right, cool. So let's jump into this. I think you and I, for the most part, one of the questions that we often get from homeowners and from people that are looking to buy a home or sell a home is, you know what, Brandon, Kevin, I put a bunch of money in this house. I put $100,000 in this house over the last 5 years. And so therefore, I should be able to get $100,000 more for the home. Do you hear that, Kevin?
Yeah, I hear that all the time. And that's one of the most common things I hear about home improvements is people thinking they're going to get all the money back that they put into the house, which isn't always the case.
Cool. So we're going to talk about that, right? So I would agree. I mean, I think a lot of people, that's where the conversation starts as far as, I put $50,000 into this home. It's not always, and quite frankly, it's rare that you get automatically a $50,000 back in return. Rarely does that happen. So let's start with the exterior of a home, and then we'll work around the home, and then we'll work our way inside the home. Now, for those of you that are watching, I want you to ask questions. You don't need to wait. Ask questions. As Kevin and I are starting to go through different home improvements, ask questions, and then we'll make sure that we get all of those answered. All right, so starting with the exterior, let's start with the roof. I think that's a major investment people make in homes. As an appraiser, how do you look at a roof as it relates to our three buckets?
So I would say for a roof, it's going to help with the saleability. However, I don't think it's going to necessarily improve the value of a home. You have two homes side by side, identical, and one has a new roof, one doesn't. As long as the roof is functioning on the other one, I'm not going to see a huge difference in value between those two homes. However, in the eyes of a buyer, if they see a home with a new roof, that might be something that they want. So, it might sell quicker, but with regards to value, I don't think it's going to change it much.
So there's no real value, and there's no just to be clear, what you're saying is if there's no real property value from an appraiser standpoint, meaning if you've got an appraisal report in front of you, there's no line item on that appraisal that says anything about the roof specifically. Is that right?
That's right. There's no roof line item on the grid on the appraisal where the adjustments are made. It is, however, taken into consideration, and we would make note of it on the appraisal as an improvement. However, it's not going to be changing the value too much.
Okay, so that makes sense. And then so bucket one is not affected. So for those of you looking at doing a new roof, the clear takeaway here is there's no real property value gain there when it comes to appraised value. Now, as far as bucket number two, sales price, kind of the same thing there, right? There's no, doing a roof helps the home sell, but there's not because you did the roof, now automatically your sales price goes up. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty much how it works. Most people, from what I've heard, they put a roof on there and expect to get, say if they spent $15,000 on the roof, they expect to get that much more in sales price, and it doesn't work like that. That
okay. Makes sense. And to be clear for the audience, what we're not saying, Kevin, and you tell me if you agree or not, but what we're not saying is, if your house has a new roof, you may get more money for your house because of that new, it's going to help the home sell, but it's not a direct correlation because the roof was $10,000 that you get $10,000 more for the house. But if a buyer's looking at that house, it's going to help that home sell, and you may get a little bit more for the home. Would you say that's pretty accurate?
Yeah, I think so. It's obviously it's going to be more desirable to a buyer, so it will help it sell. But you may make a little bit of more money on it, but I don't think you're going to recoup the full amount that you spent on the roof.
Okay, makes sense. So let's keep moving. Same thing, I think, for windows, right? Is there anything different with windows that an appraiser looks at and says, "Oh, this house has new windows, so on the appraisal, we're going to give them a positive adjustment of $10,000." Is there anything like that on the appraisal when it comes to windows?
There is no, just like the roof, there's not a line item on the grid on the appraisal for windows. However, a home with new windows, again, we would take note of it in the appraisal, and it would help the overall condition since it is something that's going to make the home look better and feel newer with new windows throughout. So it is going to be taken into consideration in the overall condition, but there's, again, like the roof, there's not a special line item for that.
Makes sense. Okay, so okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's talk about one of the things that's. Can you hear me? Okay, Kevin?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about one of the things I think that's probably most debatable, both in this conversation and really just out there with the general public, and that is pools. I think pools causes the most amount of conversation for sure. Do you find that to be in your practice as well?
Yeah, that's pretty common, especially here in San Diego. A lot of people have pools. So with pools, it's kind of the same thing, but you're spending a lot of money on a pool. I mean, I would say $20,000 up to $100,000, depending on how nice it is or what you're getting. And the pool, realistically, there is a line item typically added for pool and spa on an appraisal, and that's going to usually add $10,000 to $20,000 on average, I would say. It's always subjective, though, so depending on the appraiser and depending on how nice the pool is, how big it is, it could be higher, it could be lower than that, but typically what I see is a $10,000 to $20,000 value increase on appraised value increase on the home.
Okay, so for bucket number one, we've got our first thing that actually brings real property value. Is that correct?
Yes, it does bring some value. However, you're not going to get your full return on investment on that. You're not going to get all the, say, $50,000 that you put into the pool. You won't get that back typically.
Makes sense. Now, with the pool, so that makes sense. Now, with the pool, when you go to sell the home, this is where I think is probably the most controversial, I would say, is because we just laid out the fact that pools does have real property value, but when you go to sell that home, it can help and hurt you at the same time. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And it really depends on the buyer. It could really benefit you depending on who's looking at the home. If it's someone that needs a pool or wants a pool, because there are people out there that are looking for homes with pools. However, not everyone's going to want that. So I think it just kind of depends.
Because that's what I want to make clear to the audience tonight is there's a certain population of people that wouldn't even consider the house because it has a pool, and there's a certain amount of buyers that would only consider a house with a pool. And therefore, I think, Kevin, what you're saying is it just depends on the specific buyer and what they want. But from a saleability standpoint, it's not always, because you have a pool, the house sells for more money. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So any improvement that you're doing to your home for your own enjoyment is not always going to be enjoyable for everybody else, that someone that may want to move into your home.
Well said. So can you say that again? It's not, how did you say that?
Any improvement that you're putting into your home for your own enjoyment isn't always going to be enjoyable, or a buyer may not have the same level of enjoyment for that improvement, so they may not see the value in it.
Wow, that's a really good point. And I think that's another key takeaway for anybody that's going to watch this is when you look at that home improvement, you got to look at it through those two lenses. Am I doing this for me and for my family's enjoyment, or am I looking at this to get a return? And that's what this whole show is about tonight is which lens are you looking through? And we're trying to bring you the facts and the truth about which is going to affect that decision or not. Would you agree?
Yeah, and for a pool, it's going to be for your own enjoyment most of the time, and you will get a little bit of a return on it, but you're not going to, like I said earlier, you won't recoup your whole investment probably. So that kind of does a little bit of both, and not everything falls into that type of category.
All right, cool. So I want to talk about one more item on the exterior, then we'll start to go inside the house. Landscaping. How do you look at that as an appraiser when it comes to real property value?
Landscaping is same thing, I think. I mean, there's not typically a line item for landscaping. However, depending on the appraiser and depending on the landscaping, you could add a landscaping line item on the grid and add some value to it. So, a home that has, a huge tropical garden, and you can tell there's a lot of work put into the landscaping, that is going to help it sell faster and for more money typically. And also the appraised value will probably be up if you're comparing it to a home without that type of landscaping. But, it also depends on the appraiser. It's always subjective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, I would agree. I think that, nice landscaping affects all three buckets, especially because, we forgot one big thing. Appraisals are subjective. They are not, right? If you get three appraisers at the same house at the same time, they all three come out with three different values. Is that a correct and accurate statement?
Yeah, so an appraisal is an opinion of value. So each appraiser, like you said, you get three appraisers out to a house. There's a chance they're going to be close or similar, but you might get three different numbers. It's just everything is subjective, and the adjustments that we're making on the appraisals are all subjective. So it's it's up to the appraiser. So you're going to get different opinions.
Got it. And with landscaping, because it is appealing to the eye as a first impression, I would agree that it affects all three buckets. It helps overall property value because it's helping that appraiser justify a higher value. You're probably going to get more from a sales price perspective when you go to sell the home, and it helps the home sell, right? So landscaping as a takeaway for the exterior, I think, is a good idea when you're spending time on the exterior of a home. Kevin, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And one more thing, it kind of falls in line with the other items we just discussed. If you're putting $100,000 into landscaping, that I know that's a pretty high number, but that does happen and people expect to get 100,000 more for their property when they sell it. That's typically not how it's going to work, but it is going to help you drive more buyers to the property and probably sell it for higher than the comparables that don't have that type of landscaping.
No, that's a good point. And I like that you, let's keep touching on that, because I want the audience to know I don't think is there any 100% return on investment with any home improvement that you know of?
Not, nothing's set in stone really. Nothing really that stands out in my mind. I would say, kitchen and bathrooms are two of the most important items that an appraiser is looking at. So if you're going to be remodeling, then I would suggest putting money into those first, since those are taken into consideration for the overall condition a little bit more than some of the other items that you may think are significant. Does that make sense?
Yep. And so that brings me right into the interior. So why don't we get right into that? Hold on one second, Kevin. This is how this goes, real life. 1 second. Why don't we talk about kitchen and bathrooms for a second? Because I think that's one of the things that most of us think, number one, it's the most expensive thing, but from my understanding, those are actual line items on an appraisal that do bring real property value. Is that right?
Yeah, so on an appraisal, there's a condition line item, and it's known as the C rating. So you do C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, and C6, and you choose a rating on condition. On page 1 of the report, it asks you if the kitchen has been updated or remodeled in the previous 15 years. And then there's another question that asks if the bathrooms have been updated in the last 15 years. And that is a huge factor in determining the condition of the home overall. So that is definitely something that's going to increase the value if you have those things remodeled or updated.
Okay, so to be clear for the audience, and I think we would both agree, it brings real property value. It's an actual line item on an appraisal. It absolutely affects your sales price, and it absolutely affects the saleability of a home. Those are the big. Kitchen and bath is absolutely a great place to spend time and money. Correct?
Yeah, that's where people are going to be spending a lot of their time, and that's what people see when they look through the home. You have a nice updated kitchen. It's going to help with all three. It's going to check all three of the boxes that you just mentioned. Okay.
So next 2 items, and then I'm going to open this up for some questions. Well, yeah, I got a couple of things on the interior because I think this is important. These items, I think, bring a lot of frustration to homeowners, but it's like things like the furnace, the hot water heater, plumbing, electrical. Do those things have any real property value?
They're going to help with saleability. It may make the home more desirable to a buyer. However, with an appraisal, we take note of it as an update or an upgrade, and from there it falls kind of into the overall condition adjustment. So it may help a little bit, but replacing a furnace is not typically going to be something that is going to increase your appraised value. It will help with saleability, I believe, though.
Okay, so help. Yeah, I agree. Helps absolutely bucket 3. What about sales price? Kevin, I got a brand new furnace last year. Can we list the house for more money?
I would say no. But that being said, you may, it's going to make your home more desirable than your neighbors who doesn't have that same updated new furnace. So, if 2 homes side by side, one has a new furnace, new roof, new air conditioner, new plumbing, it's, that home probably will sell for a little bit more just knowing those things, but it's not gonna make a huge difference as long as, everything's working and the buyer knows that if the buyer knows everything's new, basically, then yes, it may help the price a little bit, but it's not going to be anything too drastic.
Yeah, it's really going to help justify the price. Whereas, here's the way I look at it. If you got 2 homes that are listed at $300,000, one has a brand new furnace, one has a furnace that's about to go. The one with the brand new furnace, it's easier for the buyer to justify the 300, whereas the one that doesn't, maybe the buyer takes that into consideration with their offer. But both are listed at 300. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I totally agree on that.
Okay. And that's what I try to explain, you know, to homeowners when they're going to put their houses on the market with things like the furnace and the hot water tank. You know, we're not going to raise the listing price based on those things, but it absolutely is going to help the home sell, and it's going to help justify our price in the marketplace. All right, so moving right on, we talked about kitchens and baths. I want to talk about paint jobs. You know, this is another one where I think a lot of people say, Brandon, I just painted my house, you know, does this increase the value of my home? Talk to me about the way you look at that in the eyes of an appraiser first, with real property value.
Yeah, so as an appraiser, we would look at the exterior and interior of the home for new paint. If there is new paint, take note of it in the report, list it as, you know, put it under the upgrades list basically, but that's not going to change. That's not going to change much. Obviously, the home's going to look a lot better with new paint, so it may help with the overall condition. However, I typically don't see, you know, that increasing the value too much.
You're not giving a positive or a negative adjustment when you go to appraise a house for paint jobs.
That's right. It's going to help with saleability, but it's not. It doesn't have its own line item on an appraisal, and it's not going to affect the value too much.
Got it. Okay. No, I agree. I mean, a lot of these things, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this with you, because a lot of these things help a home sell, help a home justify its asking price, but very minimal things, you know, affect real property value. All right. So let's end. Well, you know what? I'm going to cover basements for just a second. You know, basements absolutely, I think, affect all three buckets. Having a finished basement, having a finished walkout basement is one thing that's very, very cut and dry. Increased property value, real property value, increases sales price, and increased saleability. You know, a finished basement, a finished walkout basement is probably, I would say even more so than a kitchen and a bathroom, is probably the thing that is an absolute. If there were any absolutes in life, I think a finished basement affects all three buckets. But I want to end my conversation, Kevin, with you around appliances. You know, how do you look at appliances?
So that will, you know, updating the appliances, getting stainless steel appliances, you know, whatever you want to do there is going to help with the overall condition rating. It falls in the kitchen. So it's going to help with the kitchen remodeling section. It's going to, it'll help a little bit with the value, I think, just because it falls under the condition rating. So, you know, I think it does make a bit of a difference if you're getting stainless steel appliances, because no one wants an updated kitchen with old appliances in it, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it helps a little bit. But yeah, you typically, you're not going to raise the value of the home again on the list price just because there's new appliances.
Okay. Does it affect somebody negatively if you go and appraise a home and they don't have stainless steel appliances? I mean, do you ding them for value?
We don't necessarily ding them for value for that, but it does help with, like I said, the overall condition. So depending on the appliances that they have in there, you know, if they're all old and they make the whole kitchen look bad because they're standing out and they're an eyesore or something, then yeah, that's going to probably affect the condition rating a little bit. But that doesn't mean you have to go and get new appliances to increase the value.
Okay.
Like, as long as you have something that looks presentable there, and you know, preferably, you know, a lot of people do prefer the stainless steel, so it's also going to help a little bit with saleability.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely would agree. Now I'm gonna ask to see if anybody has any questions. I don't think we've got a huge audience at this time, but I'm sure questions will come in over the next couple of days. But what advice or what would you say to a homeowner as they think and consider different home improvements as an appraiser that they should think about and that they should consider as they're making these home improvements?
I would say just don't go in with the expectation of getting all of your money back that you're putting into your home, especially if you're making improvements that are for your own enjoyment. And while those are nice and they will, a lot of them will help the value, you're probably not going to recoup that full amount most of the time. So I would focus mainly, if you're looking to increase value, kitchen and bathrooms, as I mentioned earlier, are two very important points in the home that we're looking at as an appraiser. So I would look more into those. If you're going to spend a lot of money, then that's a good place to start.
Awesome. That's great advice. And here in Michigan, I think the thing I touched on earlier, I would say it's kitchen, bathrooms, and basements are the big three. So question from from one of the viewers. Thanks, Christina, for the question. Christina asks about attached garages versus detached garages, Kevin. Is there a difference that you see in value if there's a attached garage versus detached?
Typically, no. I've done over 1,000 appraisals probably, and I've never seen a difference in value from a detached to an attached garage. However, there is a difference in value in a say 3-car garage compared to a 2-car garage. You're making adjustments for how many cars can fit in it usually, but not. I don't usually see anything with detached or attached.
All right. So if I heard you right, and I think I would agree. If a house has a 2-car attached or a 2-car detached with bucket 1, let's be really clear on property value, there's no effect. However, maybe it could affect the saleability, bucket number 3, because someone might want an attached garage versus detached. I think that's probably the bucket that gets affected the most versus buckets 1 and 2, sales price and real property value. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I didn't touch on that, but yes, some buyers may prefer a detached or some buyers may prefer an attached garage, so it will affect the saleability. However, like I said, it's not typically going to change anything with the value.
Awesome. Makes sense. Christina, hopefully that answers your question. So I'm going to give it just another minute. If anybody else has any questions around real property value, how to get more money for your home, or what actually helps or hurts the sale of your home, go ahead and ask it. If not, Kevin, again, I just want to thank you for taking time. I know how crazy everybody is, right? And, it's all about, I think, giving value back to the general consumers, which is, I think, what people want. I think people are constantly seeking information, and there's so much information out there that the reason I wanted to do this with you is to bring some truth to the audience.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here, and if anyone has questions after watching the replay on this, just put them in the comments and I'll be checking on it. So I'll be happy to reply there if anyone has any questions.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you so much, man. Have a great weekend, and I'm sure you and I will talk real soon. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.